For decades, Republicans in Texas have been making it harder for Texans to vote. They know that their best chance to hold on to power is to limit access to the ballot. Because when more people vote, our democracy is strengthened. And when more Texans vote, Democrats win. Now, Republicans are exploiting a global health crisis to keep people from exercising their right to vote. And we won't let them get away with it. Texas Democrats will never stop fighting to expand and protect access to the ballot. In order to turn Texas blue in November, we're committed to registering and engaging a new electorate that reflects the diversity of our great state. But if we're going to be able to win, all eligible voters in Texas must be able to cast the ballot and have that vote count. When it comes to voter protection, we've taken to the courts to challenge Republican voter suppression efforts. We fought Republicans' discriminatory voter ID law and won, and beat David Whitley when he corruptly tried to purge the voter rolls. We've also launched a year-round voter protection hotline, which is helping voters navigate the voting process from beginning to end. In order to get more Texans registered to vote, we've undertaken the most expansive voter registration program in our party's history. We recently launched registertexas.com to ensure that all Texans can register to vote from the safety of their own homes. We're also mailing hundreds of thousands of voter registration applications to unregistered voters across the state. Democracy works better when more people vote. Learn more about our voter expansion and voter protection efforts by texting ACCESS to 21.
Every Marine knows the saying from the Battle of Belleau Wood. Retreat, hell! We just got here. 1,800 sacrificed their lives. But when Donald Trump was asked to pay his respects, he said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." Surprised? Trump attacked John McCain, tortured for years, as a loser who is not a war hero. Now as president, Trump looked at Arlington Cemetery and asked, "I don't get it. What was in it for them?" For them, they swore an oath to protect our country. They made the ultimate sacrifice. Donald Trump inherited everything, sacrificed nothing, scoffs at the valor of those who gave it all for America. The time for change is now.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message. Hello and welcome everyone to our women's veteran events featuring MJ Hegar and also veterans and military families across the state of Texas. My name is Brooklynne Mosley. I'm the coordinated campaign director and I'm also an Air Force veteran. I'm going to allow our speakers, we have a lot of great speakers, to have an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with our next senator, MJ Hegar.
Thanks, Brooklynne. Thank you all so much for joining us. We have so much to talk about, so much going on in our country and in our state right now. But frankly, I think that the current reporting on the comments from our commander-in-chief, it's really important that we pause and talk about this for a minute. And frankly, for me, it's not even important whether or not you put credibility in the reporting. I, for one, do put credibility in the reporting. And I think that the constant attacks on the credibility of our free press democracy to have an independent, credible, free press. And that's why when The Atlantic puts out goes through so much vetting. There's also, this administration putting a real credibility question on our intelligence also. So this attack on the credibility of our intelligence agencies and our free press is intentional. It's a threat to our democracy. I don't always love everything that's reported about me, but I don't go out and say that it's a lie just because it's convenient, because I recognize how important it is that we not do that to the American people. So for me, I believe this reporting, one, because I believe in the credibility of the press. And I know the kind of vetting and the fact checking that this article went through. But more importantly, if you're watching this and you're questioning the credibility of this, you need to be thinking about it in the aggregate, in the environment of the other comments and actions that this president has taken. And that's why I hold John Cornyn accountable when he's silent. And when he is silent on things like Russian bounties on our soldiers in Afghanistan, election interference, when he doesn't insist that Mitch McConnell put an election security bill that was put forward by a Republican senator, by the way, up for a vote, when we don't have leaders that stand up against the public comments, that you don't have to believe in the credibility of our press to be able to believe with your own eyes and ears that this president is saying things about John McCain and how he prefers people that weren't captured. I take this very seriously. I am a pilot who was shot down, and that means that our commander-in-chief thinks that I'm a loser. More importantly, when I heard these comments and this reporting, I flashed back to the friends that I've lost, to their children that I've had to watch grow up remotely on social media, to the men and women I've medevaced off the battlefield that were wounded or were killed. For me, it's a question of, we cannot allow someone to have the power to deploy our troops if that person doesn't understand the weight of the sacrifice that he's asking people to make. When you are in the middle of a battle and the shit is hitting the fan and the bullets are flying, you do so with a clear mind and a true heart, fighting for the person next to you. But also, that you wouldn't be in that situation unless you absolutely had to, that you are able to rely on the fact that the people who make the decision to put you in that situation do so with a respect for the sacrifice that they are asking you to make. And so for me, the idea that a commander-in-chief would not understand the gravity of the sacrifice he's asking us to make, I don't think he should have the right to deploy troops anywhere. The attacks on our generals, the fact that our nonpartisan and sometimes conservative, sometimes former cabinet members, generals stand up and speak out against this administration. For those men and women in uniform who might be hearing this message, y'all know how difficult that is and how against our training and our culture that is. And that and other things that have been made public are huge red flags for me and are why it gives credibility to this reporting. I see so much bravery and servant leadership right here from some of the people that we're about to hear from, people that have sacrificed. And I know that for the soldiers and the veterans across Texas, all we ask is that that we get that respect and that we hold people accountable who don't show that solemnity and that respect for the sacrifice that we make. You're free to have that opinion. You're not free to have that opinion and be responsible for deploying troops. So I'm hoping that my fellow Texans are going to hold any elected official accountable that either talks this way or alternatively doesn't hold our commander-in-chief accountable when he does talk this way. And I include John Cornyn in that. This is not even a political thing for me. I would be making these statements against a Democrat as well. And the Flash here also agrees as he goes off to fight crime somewhere, that we should be holding people accountable. And I just want to circle back real quick before I hear from the next person, that to hold him accountable, a free and credible press is absolutely critical. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for bearing with me as I work through my outrage, as I'm not able to articulate the passion that I'm feeling right now for our men and women who are in uniform now, who are deployed, for the attacks on our troops that this commander-in-chief has made toward transgender troops, when he didn't have the courage to step up and serve his country when he was called. I don't think he should be allowed to tell transgender troops that they're not good enough to wear the uniform and serve our country. There's a lot to unpack here, y'all, and we have a short amount of time, and I don't want to take up too much of it. So I'm going to pass the mic to the next person, but I'm just appreciative that y'all are here and open-minded to not only holding this commander-in-chief responsible for his comments, both public and private, but also holding John Cornyn and his ilk responsible for being complicit.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is a mother, a Iraq veteran, a lawyer, and most of all, a leader. And she's running for the House District 97. And I'll give the floor to Elizabeth Beck.
Thank you, Brooklynne, and thank you, MJ, for those words. I appreciate your service and do not think that you are a loser or a sucker for defending our country. So thank you for that. I am Elizabeth Beck. I am the next state representative for House District 97, and when elected, I will be the first woman veteran to have served in the Texas House. The president asked a Gold Star father what's in it for them, and his words are deeply hurtful to me because I know what's in it for us. One of the most meaningful days of my life was the day that I returned home from Iraq, and we flew into Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I will never forget the bus ride from the airport to the gymnasium. People stopped, got out of their cars, and waved. Children came running out of their homes, waving flags to welcome us home. And that is what is in it for me, is the ability to serve a cause that is greater than myself, the opportunity to seek a better life than I had before the military, an opportunity to be surrounded by the most amazing, noble, hardworking humans on the planet, an ability to make myself better and to challenge myself and to do more. And that is what is in it for members of the United States military. And to have a commander-in-chief that would say such vile things about the men and women that are far braver than he will ever be, that have more sense of selfless service to our nation than he will ever have, is absolutely disgusting. And it is absolutely why we must elect Joe Biden on November 3rd, because we need a commander-in-chief that appreciates the sacrifice that is made by our members of the military and the sacrifice that is made by their loved ones when they send them off to war, or when those veterans don't come home from war, that sadness. And Joe Biden knows what it's like to hug a child as they got on a plane to go to war. He knows what that sacrifice is like, and he has a long history of supporting military members and veterans across this nation. And we need a leader that supports our military. We need our members of the Army, of the Navy, of the Air Force, of the Marines to wake up and know that the person at the top, that their commander-in-chief has their back and supports them and will do absolutely what is best for them and what is best for our country. And what they have today is a commander-in-chief that thinks that they're losers, that thinks that they are suckers because they chose a calling that is greater than self. And we need a president that is choosing a calling that is greater than self. And that is why we have got to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on November 3rd, because it is time that we get rid of the rhetoric, that we stop using our military members as props to drape ourselves in the flag, that we have people in office that are willing to fight to make sure that they have the things that they need to secure our nation and to keep our nation the leader globally. Thank you so much for having me today. And Brooklynne, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you so very much. Our next speaker is Hilda Guardiola, and she is a Gold Star mother who lost her son, Sergeant Michael Barrera, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. First of all, thank you all for your service. You ladies are awesome. I apologize that I have to be sitting outside. I live out in the country, and as you can hear, the jets are going by. We don't have excellent internet service, but I did want to be a part of this. Again, I apologize. Anytime I think about my son, even though it's been 17 years, I always cry. And I'm sorry. When I first heard the words that my son was a loser, I thought to myself, my son wasn't a loser. What was my son? He didn't ask to go to war. He volunteered. This is an all-volunteer military. And that's what he wanted to do. Yes, I jumped the gun because that was the first thing I heard, was my son being called a loser. And all those other soldiers who sacrificed their lives being called losers. It was difficult for me. And I know that it's been said that it's alleged that he said it. Well, unfortunately, and I know I'm going to upset a lot of people because we have a lot of friends that are Trump supporters, but I honestly believe that he did say it. And it's heartbreaking to have to receive a flag and being thanked for my son's sacrifice. I didn't want to lose my son, but he wanted to serve his country. He loved his country. He was there to protect our freedoms, freedoms that we take for granted. Yes, freedom of speech, but it's also appropriate speech. Think before you speak. Anyone can say anything, and yes, my son died to give you that right. But please think before you speak. For all the men and women, a lot of young men, a lot of young women who have sacrificed for our country. We come from a long military family. My dad, I had 3 brothers in Vietnam at the same time. My mom worried about her 3 boys. 2 of them were Marines, 2 of them were wounded, but they came home. I didn't have my son come home. He did come home, but not the way I wanted him to come home. So I ask you to please think and weigh everything before you make a decision on your voting. I believe Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris will do good for our country, but don't take my word for it. Read, look at the facts. Don't hear what everybody's talking about. And if you have a question, I'm pretty sure that if you went directly to the Biden committee, the Harris committee, they will answer the question for you. And I just ask Mr. Biden to please, and Ms. Harris, stay true to yourselves. All we want is the truth. We want honesty. So please, I ask of you, vote for the Biden-Harris team. I think it will be a good one. And again, ladies, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for allowing me to be here with you all, considering all my little issues. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hilda. Our next speaker is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, former Marine, Juanita Sepulveda. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's certainly a pleasure being able to speak with other veterans. And my heart goes out to you, Hilda. We often say that there are certain clubs you don't want to belong to. I certainly do not want to belong to the Gold Star Club. I have the honor of having a son who's now in the Army and a daughter who will soon be going into the Navy. So I share your concern. We talk about facts. We talk about the fact that, our commander-in-chief, and I have to use that word sparingly, commander-in-chief, who's supposed to be our leader. One fact is he's made the statement. It's been a long history of disrespect to our women and our men in uniform. I think one of the latest one was, calling, Senator McCain, who a loser because he was captured. Being captured isn't degrading. It's staying true to our mission. When we all take that oath that, we are to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If the nation is not realizing that we have a domestic enemy that portrays to speak truth, and yet is documented that is false, and then it turns around and makes these accusations that it's false news, take the time to do the research. Take the time, not just take people at their word, but do your due diligence. The president has no honor and no shame. We believe that, our troops are being sent for the correct purpose, and I disagree. I don't believe that he does respect our men and women in uniform. He calls our military suckers, and that all fallen comrades in arms are losers. We've known that that's been authenticated. Attending Bella Woods and seeing that he's being protected by Marines and not understanding the significance of that. The constant, failure to release documents is being asked by his constituents. failure to be able to stand up for our troops when there's bounties on our service members who have sworn an oath to protect this country, and yet our commander-in-chief is not wanting to step up and protect our men and women who pay the ultimate sacrifice to defend this country. I don't see any other forms of declaration that I'm seeing from our commander-in-chief in which he stands firmly to bring this nation back to a great state. And I only, plead to our brothers and sisters in arms to do your due diligence. Do not go blindly, following a leader that cannot, one, release the information that's being requested of them, has a track record of failed businesses, has a documented statements in which even his own subordinates are bringing to surface. So as we know that there's reports that are being put out that are being made accusations of false, I don't know. The freedom of speech, as Hilda stated, and I'm going to mimic some of the things that MJ stated. He has a history, he has a track record, and not everything could be false. Yes, there are allegations, but I believe that our press, as is stated, freedom of press, I believe they have the credibility to be able to do their due diligence and researching, and they've been put on numerous, having to testify that it's necessary to ensure that what they're being reported is accurate. I just hope that my brothers and sisters in arms, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard see the true false of this commander-in-chief. We need a leader that has our best interest and our best interest unified. And I don't see the unification with this commander-in-chief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder for our guests on the show, on this conference, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm going to start. As members of the military family, what were your first reactions to hearing President Trump's horrific comments? And are you surprised by his remarks?
I'll go ahead and lead off on that one. I read that article, and I have come not to expect leadership from President Trump, but I certainly never expected to read the words loser or sucker when hearing him refer to our members of the military. And I couldn't formulate a response initially because it was such a gut punch to hear the person that is supposed to be leading our country speak about service members that way, and to think about how I felt being called a loser, or to have the images that we all just experienced with Hilda, the pain of those families. Hearing their children called these names, and it was disgusting, and it was really a blow to morale generally. And I think that we've got to get rid of that rhetoric in the White House, because we need to have faith in our commander-in-chief and our members of the military, and the people that proudly served, our veterans that have proudly served, need to know that that our country thanks them for their service, not degrades them.
I actually have a comment about that. Currently, I'm calm, but I was enraged because I agree. I'm not a loser. My former husband, who's also force reconnaissance, is not a loser. 20 years plus. My son, who's now in special forces, is not a loser. My daughter, who's going into the Navy, is not a loser. They're not suckers. They're educated. They're degreed. And though I'm composed, the rage I have, knowing that I served, a country with a leader such as this, it's disturbing, it's enraged, it's fear for our service members that he's not going to have their best interest. As an entrepreneur, I'm ready to to donate, to give, to dedicate time and services and products, whatever it is that I have. I'm not so sure that we have this commander-in-chief will ever do such thing and make that ultimate sacrifice. He can't possibly understand the sacrifice when he himself has never served. Excuses are excuses, and I'd love to say the true meaning behind everyone has an excuse, and I'm sure everyone knows that expression, but it's beginning to stink. And so we need to change leadership, and we need to change it immediately.
My first reaction was I had like flashbacks of the people that I've lost in the back of my medevac helicopter, and thinking about families like Hilda. Hilda, as a mom, I can't even fathom the amount of pain that hearing something like that brought to you, and I'm so sorry. And what struck me, as you said, 17 years ago, we have to remember that there are kids serving and risking their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan right now who were not born when September 11th happened. We need leaders, both Republicans and Democrats, who understand that there are things worth fighting for, but who also understand the awesome cost of war. You're never going to hear me say that there's no reason to deploy to a combat zone. We are the leaders of the free world. We have to stand against genocide. We have to protect democracy, but we are overcommitted around the world. And we need people like, one of the things that I am excited about for a Joe Biden presidency is that because he had a son who served and who lost his life because of the experiences that he had. I mean, I consider that to be a combat loss. When you die from cancer, from being exposed to burn pits in a combat zone, that's a combat loss to me. He's not going to deploy troops lightly. He understands, and it's not because he's a Democrat. It's because he's an American, and he understands servant leadership and sacrifice, just like John McCain did, a Democrat and a Republican who understand the same thing. Can we just get past this partisan bullshit and get to a place where we just elect servant leaders who are going to value our servicemen and women in uniform and who aren't going to politicize everything? And can we elect people who have the backbone to stand up to their own party and stop with the selective outrage and only, step out and call someone out if they're of the other party? We've got to stop electing people that are so in lockstep with their talking points that they can't see virtue. So my first, reaction was pain for the family members who have lost loved ones, especially children, and thinking about the friends of mine that I've lost and how old their kids are now and how those kids probably feel about hearing this as well.
I have a question for MJ. Could you comment on Senator Cornyn responding to Woodward's reporting that President Trump intentionally downplayed the seriousness of the pandemic by saying, "I don't have any confidence in the reporting, so I'm not going to comment despite there being audio"?
Yeah, obviously I think there's two issues here. One, the fact that he was downplaying the pandemic, which we knew. I mean, that the Woodward recording isn't the first time that we have him on record saying that. So the fact that he's downplaying the pandemic, talking about how we lose more people to the flu and we don't shut down the country and all of that. We have so many politicians who make statements and decisions based on what's politically convenient and what's good for them instead of what's good for their constituents and the country and our state and working families. So, I mean, there's that issue. And there's the fact that, like I just said, we need to elect people who don't show selective outrage and can actually, call things out when they see them, regardless of who said them. but we've seen a pattern of behavior from John Cornyn that he lacks the backbone to stand up to his party leadership. And I believe it's because he wants to be Senate Majority Leader. So he's going to be a good little lapdog and do as he's told and mind his P's and Q's so that he can grab that Senate Majority Leader position. But there's a bigger issue here. There's, I touched on it in my opening, sowing a lack of confidence in our free press is so dangerous to our democracy. I mean, when we look around the world at the dictatorships and the autocrats and the people that this president seems to admire so much, we see a state-run media that does not have the freedom to report the facts to people so that people can make up their mind on how to live their lives and who to support and what to do. We see it we're seeing it in Belarus right now. We're seeing it in Hong Kong. We're seeing it around the world. And I am so cognizant of the responsibility that we have to the next generation putting on the uniform, that we maintain our influence on a global stage and our credibility, whether it's not committing human rights violations on our southern border, whether it's not responding with police brutality to peaceful protests. I think we need to stand unified, Democrats and Republicans, against violent riots and hurting people and property, and stand unified, supporting people's calls for social justice and for peaceful protests calling for reform. I don't understand why that's a partisan issue. We have to set the example around the world. And one of the things we have to set the example in is respecting our free press. So when he says things like, I don't have confidence in the reporting, and we're talking about an audio recording of the words of this president, not an opinion, not an op-ed, not an editorial. I'm so uncomfortable with how many yes men and sycophants and lapdogs we have in DC.
So this is a discussion that we can talk about for forever. In 30 seconds or less, can you all just talk about what virtues do you believe are essential for a commander-in-chief to have, and how former Vice President Biden embodies those qualities?
I'll go ahead and start. I think if we're going to maintain our presence as the leaders of the free world, we need a commander-in-chief and a president who is going to not gut our State Department, build that back up, and bring back servant leaders that have served both parties so nobly, respect our alliances, and make sure that our allies know that we're good to our word, whether it's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or agreements we enter into or promises that we will stand with the Kurds in Syria, or an endless number of ways we have lost our credibility. And in Texas, your word means something. So a commander-in-chief that's going to keep his word and bring back our reputation for that, but also instill in our enemies a fear to be our enemies, and that we are going to keep our word there as well.
I'll address that as well. You asked about characteristics. The Marine Corps teaches us honor, courage, and commitment. One example that I see with Joe Biden is during his last 4 decades of public service, he was an ardent supporter of veterans in the U.S. military. During his tenure as U.S. Senator, he fought to secure, additional funding for veteran health care, including funding to support veterans struggling with mental health illnesses. And he's also fought to expand housing benefits for the U.S. veterans. You can't get any more committed to that to ensure that you come and make it come to fruition. The commitment is, I see where he is willing to take on an opponent in spite of the funding that he currently has and keep pushing forward. I almost feel like it's David and Goliath, and I believe, Mr. Biden, the future president, has those qualities that I mentioned: honor, courage, and commitment. And you're absolutely right, MJ. In Texas, our word means something. And unfortunately, the current commander-in-chief has violated the word of integrity several times.
And I'd also like to make a comment. I wholeheartedly agree with what Ms. Hegar just said and with Ms. Sepulveda. We need to come back to our values, which we have lost. And I honestly believe that if we push to have Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris become our next commander-in-chief and our next vice president, we'll be able to obtain our dignity and our respect back to our country, because it seems to have all gone by the wayside. You know, everybody's doing this, doing that. I believe that's the one thing we need to come back to. We need to regain our strength, regain our dignity, regain our strength, and continue keeping the faith that it's all going to work out with them.
And I'll end with, you know, we need leaders with honor, with integrity, with respect, but we also need a commander-in-chief with empathy, because we need to make sure that the person that is in charge of deploying our men and women in the military take a global look at their actions and don't act from a place of ego when they're in a pissing match with a world leader. They need to take a step back and think about the implications of their actions and do so with empathy, because for every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine that they send off to war, there are families, Gold Star families, that never see those children come back. And before you make a decision to take that step, we have to make sure that we have a commander-in-chief that is willing to make sure that that cost is worth it. And President Trump acts from a place of ego, and Joe Biden will act from a place of strength, honor, integrity, and empathy when dealing with the military.
Thank you all so very much. I know that you all have, we can talk about this forever, and I want to thank everyone and give everyone an opportunity to be able to, if you wanted to have a message that anyone can take away from today's event, what would that be? And I'm going to go ahead and start with, it looks like I'm going to start with Elizabeth Beck.
I think the takeaway is that we have got to make sure that the person leading our troops is fit for the job. And Donald Trump has shown us over the past 4 years in the way that he has treated the military, his actions and his words, that he is unfit as a leader. He is unfit to be commander-in-chief, and we must elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on November 3rd.
And our next U.S. Senator, MJ Hegar.
Y'all, there is just so much on the line this election. It's this and other actions, but this type of reporting and the environment in which this is so believable from a commander-in-chief is a call to action to every patriot across the country to vote and get their families and communities to get involved, volunteer for campaigns, make your voices heard, for the love of God. It may feel counterintuitive to those of us in uniform and those on this panel, because we're trained to not make our politics heard, and we have to serve across administrations. But the time is now to stand up for the next generation putting on the uniform. We owe them a stable foreign policy environment and a commander-in-chief who understands their sacrifices, and that means electing servant leaders up and down the ballot, from Elizabeth Beck to Joe Biden. If we don't send a resounding message right now that this is unacceptable, we are going to set a dangerous precedent moving forward. That treatment and respect for our troops like this is acceptable. Our brave men and women who sacrifice so much for our country deserve better.
And Ms. Hilda, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any parting words that you would like to share? You're mute, ma'am.
I wanted to just make a comment that when my son told us that he was going to be deploying. I went off on our president back then, and he calmly tells me, Mom, that's my commander-in-chief. Please, that's my boss. All I'm asking is the same respect that these men and women in uniform have for their commander-in-chief. Our commander-in-chief should do the same. And I think that the person to do that will be Joe Biden. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, Ms. Juanita.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. And it's always a pleasure being able to speak on behalf of great leaders. Unfortunately, we need a commander-in-chief who's going to show our active duty as well as our veterans the respect that they deserve, have earned, and honor our veterans that are still with us and those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. We need to change the leadership and bring it back to a time where it is ours again. In the future, we've been taught in the military that we respect our commander-in-chief. Through thick and thin, you keep your opinions to yourself because that's the leadership that you're in. However, we're speaking about, like MJ and Elizabeth and Hilda said, we're speaking about our future. We are setting the foundation for the next 4 years to come. We have children who were once children who are now men and women serving and protecting this country. Use your voice, register, and your voice is important. It is paramount right now to be heard. That one voice can be the tipping point to changing the trajectory of this country. Register to vote. Change our commander-in-chief. Change in the way that the rest of the nation is viewing us. Show the rest of the country that we are the humanitarian nation that we were built on. It is so easy to echo what the panelists are saying, but you also need to be willing to hear the message. So the takeaway is, let your voice be heard, because you are the change that our men and women who are serving to protect you need. You need to stand up for them as well as yourself so that we can return to being the nation that we once were. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much for being here. When you're a service member, you have to, when I went through survival school, the one thing you get told is, when you go and you get deployed, your government will do whatever they can to bring you back, regardless if that's a rescue or a recovery. And you have to believe those words to be able to do what you do every single day, even if it's stepping on a plane, getting a Humvee. And the comments that our president made, really highlights, makes you question that. And so thank you all so much for being here. And keep, we got 54 days and a wake up to make this happen. So yeah, thank you all.